I believe we are now live. My name is Darren Paltrowitz, and it is a pleasure to be speaking with some excellent musicians that are also authors. And I'm joined by an excellent drummer, Shari Page, and I'm joined by an excellent author musician as well, S.W. Lauden, who we've had before here on the Meet the Music Maker series. Now, they are both authors or contributors to Forbidden Beat Perspectives on Punk Drumming, which we spoke about a couple of months ago in this series when I had Mr. S.W. Lauden on with Paul Myers. A man of his word, S.W. Lauden, he agreed to participate and talk with us again. So before I work the room to Shari, Steve, S.W., how's it going there?
It's going great, Darren. I love this, and thanks so much for having me back. You put it out there to people, hey, when I publish my next book, I'll come back, and people are like, sure, but you actually did, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
It's one of those things where somebody says they're going to do something, you might as well do it. And we're also going to be joined momentarily by Mr. Ira Elliot, another contributor.
Have I arrived?
Okay, we got Ira now. Ira, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Since you're late, we're going to say, Shari, how are you doing? Because we're working the room first.
I'm good. It's super nice out finally, so I can't complain.
Shari, you're dialing in from Long Island like I am, like we are?
No, I was going to say, fortunately, I'm not on Long Island, but I don't want to diss Long Island. I'm actually in Brooklyn, right by my practice space. We're at this bar we usually hang out at called Anchored Inn.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Have you ever met Mr. Ira Elliot before?
I have not, but I am a huge fan. So I'm super excited about today.
You would not be the only one that's a big fan of Mr. Ira, Misdemeanor Elliot. Do they still call you that, Misdemeanor Elliot, Ira?
Only you. You're the only guy who ever, that was your thing.
I think it was the second Not a Surf album where it said
Yeah,
Misdemeanor Elliot.
Yeah, someone put that on a credit somewhere. Jokingly, it was like some weird CD single that only, of course, we would know about.
Yeah, well, someone's got to read the liner notes and remember what's on there.
No, you're very.
There you go. Are you dialing in from Florida? I know you're.
Yeah, that's why I'm wearing sunglasses too. I'm in Florida. I wish I were in Brooklyn, but I'm in Florida, and yeah, it's a lovely sunny day here in Florida too.
Well, you were wearing the T-shirt of the Fuzz Tones, a band which you were in before Not a Surf. S.W. Lauden, are you familiar with the Fuzz Tones?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I love a lot of that 80s garage revival stuff that was happening, but Ira's essay in Forbidden Beat actually kicks off the book, and I had asked him just to write about sort of the history of garage rock drumming and proto-punk drumming, and he blew me away by starting with the personal story of being in the Fuzz Tones and touring with the Damned in the early 80s, which I'm not going to step on his toes because it's a fantastic story. But yes, Fuzz Tones are excellent, and Ira's essay is incredible.
Thank you, Steve. That's very kind of you. It was a life-altering event.
Yeah, Ira has been around the world multiple times, even before Not a Surf, which is pretty incredible, the longevity of your career. Shari, had you been a listener? I'm putting you on the spot here. Had you been a listener of Not a Surf over the years?
100%. And usually when I'm talking to the person, I'm like, I'm not quite cool, maybe I've heard them. For me, the song Treading Water it's one of my all-time favorite songs. I love Blizzard of 77. I've been a huge.
I happen to be. That's one of the greatest songs because I'm not on it. That's why it so stands out in the catalog. Because I'm not there to ruin it. So that's why that's. So
Ira says that in jest, but when they perform that live, that is him on vocals. So
the singing is nice.
Let me go Google songs that you're drumming on.
Yeah. No, that's like one of those rare ones. I don't. They usually I can't shut up, but that's my first impulse. Like, how can I do nothing on this song? That would be the best. Like, always to do nothing is choice number one. But,
I'm gonna start trying to do that. I'll just sit here and you guys do your thing.
Drums are overrated, man.
Now, Shari, I remember getting a press release last year about the Thick album called 5 Years Behind. You're from the band Thick. Is that the latest and the greatest from you, or are we missing what the latest and the greatest is?
We put out a single, like a cute little single for Valentine's Day called Love You Forever. And we're going into the studio next week, which is scary. It's coming up. Yeah, so we're working on the next album, and we've just been writing.
Well, it's good to know that it's not just done in the studio, improvised. And all of you in contributing to this book had the joy, and I say joy, of writing long form. It's not just like improvising a 3-minute song and it's done. Writing is something that usually you write it, you think it's done, somebody goes, hey, there's a couple of typos, hey, needs to be longer, needs to be shorter, etc. Ira, how long did it take you to write this section of the book?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably not too long. I mean, the basic story has been rattling around in my head, and I've told it many times over the years. So just kind of getting that story out was kind of the main part of it. I knew I could sort of tie it, because that was a sort of a bridge concept. When writing about drumming is intrinsically difficult. You just want to make it like some people did. They just make a list of songs, like, here's what I'm talking about. So sure. I knew so that was my first problem. So this was it's turned out in my life, I had this bridge moment where, as being in a rock band, opening for a punk band, and the sort of similarities kind of put me, I felt, at the crux of this concept. So I was able to tie it to that story. But the story itself, just a matter of sort of like polishing. There's so much that story I could tell. I tried to carve away everything that wasn't important about it. Well, that's why I relied on Steve to sort of edit out all this stuff that I didn't need to be said. But yeah, I mean, that story could go on and on and on and on. But that whole episode in my life was really pretty incredible. But writing the thing itself probably only took me, I don't know, over a course of a couple of weeks, a couple hours here, a couple hours there. Not that.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about working with Ira on this particular piece was that we had worked on an essay for one of my previous books together. And so Ira and I had a real rhythm when it came to his writing. He's a fantastic writer, a fantastic storyteller. Sure. So it was like really easy for me to think like, oh, I got to get Ira in this punk drumming book. And then to see what he came back with as such a personal story was like, it was impressive. But like first draft, he was like already there, right? The story was already there. The bones of the story were already there. And it does a really good job of like setting the foundation for the entire story arc of the book, because we're trying to cover 50 years of punk drumming, which is not very easy to do. So Ira comes in with the monkey wrench of just sort of like, I'm going to start in the 50s, and he's talking about Chuck Berry's drummer. Yeah. He's talking about the Sonics drummer, and he gets us to the Stooges.
That's how I see it, as a continuum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was Ira one of the first essays that you received a draft of? I asked it because putting it so prominently towards the beginning of the book, some writers or some authors know, hey, this is the sequence, now we got to collect it. And other people go, let's see what comes in, and then we'll worry about where to sequence it.
I would love to claim that I knew from the start how this thing was going to go, but the original idea, I was going to try to do like a well-researched 400-page tome that I wrote everything. And then I started realizing as a reader, I was more interested in the perspectives of people like Shari and Ira and Urian and Lynn Percotrul and Mike Watt. Like, I wanted to hear other people's stories and their perspective on this thing that doesn't get a lot of spotlight. But I also needed to kind of like set the stage for what I mean by punk drumming. And so I got really lucky in that I had Ira's proto-punk and garage rock essay. Kurt Weiss, who had written a book about New York Dolls and Heartbreakers drummer Jerry Nolan, decided to do an essay for me. And he really writes about sort of right where Ira ends is where Kurt picks up. And then I was very lucky to get John Robb, who's a really well-known English journalist and author and musician himself, to write about the 70s original punk wave in Britain. So between those three essays, I felt like we already set the stage for what the book was going to be. And then it allowed all the perspectives that followed behind that.
Yeah, Steve, or SW, am I allowed to publicly call you Steve, or is it SW only here?
You can call me almost anything you want, but yes, Steve is definitely one of the names that I'll respond to.
So Steve, I applaud the knack that you had for both getting the historian indie stuff and some mainstream names in there. So it's a really fantastic collection on that end. But shifting over to Shari, before I ask my question, fun fact, I was going to be named Shari had I been born female, but
really?
Yeah, my parents liked Shari Lewis. the puppeteer.
Oh my God, lamb chop.
Lamb Chop, and my younger sister got that name instead, so that's the Shari over here. But
oh wow, how
for
does she
you,
spell it?
Shari.
I thought they named her Lamb Chop.
Wow, same spelling.
Middle
Also,
name is
since-
Lamb Chop. Yes.
Also, since you're from Long Island, you say it because people are always like, "How do you say your name?" And I'm like, "My parents are from Queens and Brooklyn, so Shari."
That's how my parents.
Since you're
said
from
it.
Long Island, you just said it. How my name should be said.
I intentionally lost the accent to the best of my ability, but hey, back to you here. I believe first time author. Was it a complicated process for you to write about drumming? Because as Ira said, you can naturally drum, but writing about your craft is not always the easiest for anybody.
Yeah, writing is always interesting because it's, for me, I mean, I always grew up loving writing, but it's not something that I've been actively doing. I mean, at band practices, it's very verbal, like try singing it this way, but I'm not really, writing out all the lyrics. I'm mostly focusing on drumming. So it was a lot of just really thinking about what I'm saying and brainstorming the drummers I want to write about. And yeah, it wasn't like I sat down and just immediately thought of everything. It definitely took a while to make sure I liked what I was saying and that the people I'm honoring, I'm saying the right things. I'm not saying anything, quote unquote, stupid.
Yeah, definitely not saying anything stupid. And as we were talking about offline before we started, you single out some great people that not everybody talks about. For example, Karen Carpenter was one hell of a drummer. Early into the Carpenters live shows, she would do a drum solo. I don't believe towards the end she did so much because they tried to reinvent her as more of a solo artist, a feature. But did you always know that Karen Carpenter was a hell of a drummer?
Yeah, I mean, I used to get in these black holes on YouTube and, because I wasn't alive back then. So what's cool is that we can relive a lot of these moments on YouTube. So I'm in this black hole and I'm just watching Karen Carpenter videos. And it's so cool to me that, her and her brother had these sort of variety shows where they would just perform and she would do the craziest drum solos. And there's nothing really like it, how she would
absolutely not
perform. It's so crazy and it's like such a cool style.
Yeah. Well, Ira, being in so many different kinds of bands over the years, because we talked about the Fuzz Tones, Not a Surf, you did road crew stuff for Smithereens, the Rick Ocasek stuff you did, Bambi Kino. Was there ever a point in your career where the drum solo was part of your live show?
Go home.
Like, did you have to do an obligatory drum solo at any point in your career as part of the set list?
Oh my God, that's kind of like my nightmare. I consider myself a kind of a, I consider myself a backbeat drummer. I noodle around a lot. When I sit behind the kit, I do a lot of noodling stuff, unfocused, like Dave Grohl says, like I can do that stuff for hours and hours and kind of noodle and fiddle, but it's really unconstructed. And to play a solo, you really have to think about construction while you're doing it. It's a high skill. Luckily, I was never really in a band that demanded that of me. However, there were two famous moments where we were playing shows at festivals where the power went out. And we were playing in a big tent, maybe 5,000 Germany, 5,000, 2,000, 3,000 people in this big tent. Mm-hmm. The afternoon power goes out. And so you never know. So I'm the only one you can still hear. So I keep going. And I figure, in this particular instance, the first time, the power came back after about 2 or 3 minutes. And I was a hero because the pulse kept going and the band kicked in where we left off. And it was like 2-3 minutes of just like, I'm mostly beat keeping. And I was like, my heart was in my throat. I'm like, wow, how long am I going to keep this up? The second time it happened, I remembered the first time also in a hot outdoor, like it was a festival in the middle of the summer in Austria, so let's say. And again, like a black tent room, thousands of people, and we're playing and the power goes out. And we were third song in, we were already drenched to the skin. I'm like, well, happened before, it'll happen this time. So I dutifully soldier on. And then after, 2 minutes go by, 3 minutes go by, Matthew comes up to help out, grab some sticks. Everyone sort of joins in. Other drummers from the other bands come up, and we're all having a go. This goes on. At one point, our front of house sound man comes onto the stage, and he's standing next to me. And I know that if he's here on the stage, there's just no way the power's going back on. So I think I clocked in about 40 minutes of solo in a room. At one point I stopped, I picked up the snare kick and bass drum, and I moved it to the lip of the stage and sat down and played another 20 minutes there. I'm like, well, I'm this far in, I might as well go. That's my only, luckily they're not recorded as far as I know. But yeah, I have one 40-minute drum solo, that's it.
Wow. I mean, some of my favorite bands ever, unfortunately, always had a drum solo during every show. And I love Van Halen. I love Kiss, but I don't want a 12-minute drum solo. And you wonder, was it an insulin break? Was it a beer break? What was that thing? But Steve,
so many things.
Great drummer.
Tommy Lee. I remember seeing Tommy Lee at the Garden with the rotating drum set thing.
Yeah.
And the rest of the band were up to no good when he was doing that. They were doing a whole bunch of really untoward stuff downstairs. Like, I don't even think about it. I remember seeing, I was a Rush fan back in the day. Like the second concert I ever saw was Rush. So that was like that's a room full of guys air drumming, basically, to watch Neil play the 15-minute, whatever, 21-12, whatever the heck it was, Red Barchetta. We were like, our hearts were in our throats. It was the greatest thing. But I never aspired to that really myself. I can kind of fake my way through a Moby Dick style thing, but not for very long, I think, without falling on my face.
And there was shows when Led Zeppelin had over 30 minutes of Moby Dick, which is way too much Moby Dick for me. But
they always said it was the greatest part of the show. That all the guys in the band are like, that was always people loved that. I mean, yeah, I'm sure some people wouldn't hear it.
Fair, but
that's what started punk rock. These long drum solos. That's why punk started. No one wanted to hear these 20-minute solos. Are you kidding me? I want to hear a 3-minute song. Get in, get out, leave me alone. Punk rock.
Well said. I was actually going to lead to that destination, but before I did, Steve, did you ever have to do a drum solo or choose to do a drum solo in a concert?
No, I'm like Ira. I'm a backbeat guy. I grew up really self-taught, and I was playing in bands before I really had any right to do it, and that's just sort of the path I stayed on. So, I'm a 1, 2, 3, 4 guy with some variations in tempo. And I always say, if you want a Steve style drum track for one of your songs, I'm pretty reliable about 80% of the time.
Shari, can I also ask you, have you subjected the world to a Shari Page drum solo at any point?
I think what's good for people is that I haven't done that. I don't know. It's not to say I don't like watching drum solos, but I think it would be a lot to try to just go and play. Like I've seen Travis Barker do what Tommy Lee has done, where he's in the air and he's rotating around and he's just playing a solo. I like being in the audience watching it. I mean, I'm more of same like backbeat. Like I feel weird just playing a whole solo. I mean, we're a 3-piece band, and I'm sure like not Sir understands that also. So I guess it's just really intense within a 3-piece to try to go and do, this whole drum solo, because they're very much a unit.
Yeah, well, Ginger Baker would try that, and Ginger Baker was his own breed of I'm going to do whatever I want kind of drummer, which is that the most, this question isn't to anyone specific, but is Ginger Baker, despite the kind of music he's playing, maybe the most punk rock drummer ever, based on the fact that he always did the exact opposite of what everyone wanted him to do?
There's a great argument to be made about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Stylistically, no, but attitude-wise, yes, absolutely.
You know, it's funny. I in the interview that I did with Stephen McDonald from Red Cross and multiple other bands, he's been in Off and the Melvins and a lot of other bands. I talked to him specifically about the drummers that he would point to, and I naturally go to Keith Moon. And I'm talking about like mid-60s Keith Moon, right?
Yeah.
Seems to embody not only the playing, the sort of recklessness, the boundless energy, taking a lot of risks, playing on a small kit. And he actually countered that he thought Ringo was really the source because Ringo played to the song and kept a really steady backbeat, which I thought was really interesting because I automatically thought Keith Moon was going to be the person that everybody pointed to. Ginger Baker gets pointed to by a couple different drummers in the book as like somebody that they at least saw as an inspiration for just kind of doing your own thing. But because Ira is such a Beatles fan and a Ringo fan, I would love to know, Ira, what you think about that. Do you think Ringo is a source for punk rock?
That's a great question. Yeah, you know, there's an argument to be made. I think in the long run, what you end up is like you're always trying to find like the ultimate answer, like where did it start? And I think the thing that I'm really realizing about drumming is that like since everyone's an individual and every band's an individual, really, when you get down to it, you know, the whatever blanket, blanket label you want to put on the band, it's a series of individuals. So everyone brings their personality. So I'm thinking about this a lot. Like, you know, it's Ringo's personality, it's Keith Moon's personality, and they play the way they are, you know, so Ringo bare bones to leave me, you know, no drum solos, you know, like until he did one famously and every, you know, it's great, you know, like that 8 bars or whatever. But, you know, like, and then Keith was this wild, energetic character. He embodied something else that was really valuable, and drummers, you know, can, you know, look at one, identify with one or both or equally, you know. I always talk, and I talked about it in the first book about the sort of the quadrangle, the Mount Rushmore, you know, Keith, Ringo, John Bonham, and Charlie Watts, you know, 4 British drummers, but all different personalities and with slightly different styles, helming the biggest bands in the world. Well, why was that? You know, what is about these 4 guys? It's really interesting to me. You can sort of equate their personalities quickly with their stylistically. You know, you think of Charlie Watts, you know, English, very sort of good posture, you know, but still like a lot of great energy, amazing energy, you know, even in the 70s, he's a murderer, plays so hard, he's great. So yeah, that's the way I see it. So I don't know, yeah, maybe Ringo, maybe Keith. I go, but you know, it depends on what day of the week you ask me.
It's interesting you bring up John Bonham, right? Because at the end, one of the things that Steve McDonald talks about, like he had his older brother, Jeff, kind of shepherding him along. So consequently, he's like 12 and going to like some of the most legendary punk shows in the world, right? Like people are still talking about these shows that he went to see. But he was like, there was like this 6-month span where my brother and I bought tickets to see Led Zeppelin at the Forum in the late 70s. And he talks about how like everybody, he talks like he's a 65-year-old man because he saw all these classic bands and he's not actually that old. But he's like, we bought tickets to see Led Zeppelin. By the time we got to the show 6 months later, we had discovered the Ramones and we almost didn't care about Led Zeppelin anymore. And like, he pinpoints this exact moment where punk rock explodes in his brain. And then he's off on this really interesting and incredible life as a punk musician.
Yeah. I remember this moment. I remember the same thing at that time. Like, you know, I was a classic rock guy growing up in the 70s. I'm probably not too far in age from him. And you know, so it was all, you know, like I said, Stones, Zeppelin, Rush, all this stuff, you know, that everyone, common currency. And then this new music comes along and sort of really the energy was so incredibly different. It was so fascinating that it kind of made everything else seem really boring and old. And, you know, I ended up going back to all that stuff, of course, in the long run. But at that moment, yeah, I immediately went through my record collection. I got rid of a lot of stuff now. I probably should have kept that Kiss record or whatever. You know, there's a few things I jettisoned, not wanting people to find them in my collection after 1978. But yeah, no, it was an incredible moment. You know, like everything seemed like completely new, and there was a whole new way to go at it, and you know, a new way to, I don't know, it was really exciting at the time.
And to go from what John Bonham and Keith Moon had done in the 70s, which is like crazy technical playing in a stadium environment, to Tommy Ramone decimating it with a straight 4 beat and no rolls, right? Is like, what a
wrong
culture change.
Agreed. And the name Keith Moon came up, and he's probably my favorite drummer of all time, especially the work in the 1960s.
Same.
Yeah. Okay. No, Shari, this one was going to go.
Keith Moon.
It was going to go to you. If, by the way, is it Neil Peart or Pert? Because I hear it both ways.
I believe it's Peart.
Okay.
Peart. This is
We'll
like a
say-
Canadian-
I'm gonna go with Long Island accent and say Pert. It's probably not Pert though, right?
Well, whatever it is, genius, R.I.P.
Yeah.
Early footage I saw of him, he was totally doing the Keith Moon style of drumming, totally hitting way too many drums, fills galore, not 4/4. Shari, did you have a phase in your drumming when you were trying to do that style of Keith Moon playing?
It's funny because, you know, in high school, I was obsessed with The Who and Keith Moon. And I did, for my drum set, I did have, you know, the most drums I played on probably was just the 2 rack toms. I mean, I always wanted to experience a drum set surrounding me. But I mean, I didn't know anyone that had that because, you know, over time, like less and less drums are played in terms of a kit because it's sort of, you know, the standard jazz setup now, even with punk music.
Right.
But yeah, like I would just watch Keith Moon, especially when he had the goldfish in the drum set. And he just was so crazy. And also he brought so much of his personality to everything he was doing. And he just was
and fashionable, you know, playing in a suit. That's another question I have. Shari, have you ever played in a suit?
I did recently for a music video for the first time. And usually I'm one of those people that's just always very like hot and I have to just play in like a, you know, like a tank or just some kind of t-shirt I cut the sleeves off of.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely is a vibe. It feels like, oh yeah, everyone in the 80s had these and 70s had these suits on. So it feels hot, but it does feel cool that, you know, like iconic people over time played in like really cool outfits and had suits on.
Yeah, Ira, I remember some Blazer gigs for you. Did you ever play though in a proper Keith Moon style?
Yeah, no, I've gone through all. Yeah, proper Keith Moon style. What in which?
A proper Keith Moon style suit, or like a fashionable thing where you had to do a whole gig in a suit.
I have done that on rare occasions, and it reminds you like how difficult that is to do. You know, like those guys. I don't know if they had wardrobe. You know, those big bands have like wardrobe departments, so I guess they can dry clean those things, where they get really nasty. Like you got to remember, like I think about, I'm a Beatles guy, so the Beatles wore suits, but the Beatles only played 25 minutes at a time.
Right.
That was it. They wore the suits for 20 minutes. Their shots how long a Beatles show was, and then they were out of there. So those suits, it wasn't so bad. But I think about like 40 drummers in the 40s who would play all night in a club in a full suit with a tie, like leather shoes. Like, how did they do that? That's incredible. Well, maybe they took their jackets off, I suppose, sat behind the bandstand. But yeah, on a few occasions I've tried it. It's a lot of work. I've ended up with the t-shirt and I wear short sleeve shirts on stage just to try to remain sort of dressed, but without wearing a suit. I've tried it. It's fun to do. If you're only doing a TV show, it's one thing. You know, you're going to be on for 5 minutes and you're out of there. You can do that on TV. You don't want to do it live.
No.
2 hours.
I don't ever want to wear a suit, period. Steve, you, in your case, suit on stage, was that anything that you ever did?
Yeah, actually, I played in a band in the mid '90s called Rydell High that did a record with my
I didn't
record.
realize you were in Rydell High with Kevin Rydell, Rivers Cuomo's childhood friend.
Yeah, we made a record with Joey Cape from Lagwagon for My Records in the mid '90s. We were the album after Nerf Herder. And then Nerf Herder went and jumped to a major label, and we jumped to A&M. That band had matching gold blazers and white dress shirts and a black tie. And mine would just be soaked through with sweat and covered in beer by the time that we would get done playing. You know, we didn't really stick with that all too long. We kind of went to the golf shirt look eventually. Yeah.
like Nerf Herder, but Ira's got something to add.
But in that regard, you know, the idea of a band wearing an outfit went out by the late 60s. You know, every band came over from England, they wore matching suits, the Beatles wore matching suits. Even the Beatles themselves jettisoned the matching suit thing by whatever, 66, 67, and everyone individuated. And that became the norm. And very few bands who tried to play that card, like the Raspberries, you'll remember they tried this, you know, blue, powder blue suits. It was very uncool for them to do that. They took a lot of heat. But the band who successfully did it, if you ever think about it, but that was the Ramones. Ramones took the same concept, like we're all going to look the same. It's very, very powerful when 4 people walk on stage and you can't tell them apart. They're all got the same haircuts. They're wearing white drums, white guitar, white bass. Joey Ramone, they look like, you know, 4 variations of the same guy, like the Beatles were. It's a very powerful visual thing that a band can choose to do if they, you know, if they want to work that, you know, that was or maybe it's the great rock and roll swindle, you know, find a novel idea to hang it on. There's not too many, but the Ramones, like they used the suit idea in effect, you know, by all matching. And, you know, they played those shows, like, again, like they play in the jackets. I don't know, for at least most of the shows, all the shows, that's trying to leather motorcycle jacket. That's hard work, man.
Yeah, and they're not slowing down between songs, right? You've got like
they can't get a credit card between those songs. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, bam.
Yeah, it only gets faster.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Shari. I remember the first Ramones-ish album that we see from the late 70s. It's like 20 songs in like 40 minutes. And then the last Ramones album was something like 32 songs in 35 minutes. They got faster somehow.
Yeah.
But
faster. Can I tell my Joey Ramone story?
Well, before you do, you grew up in Forest Hills like Joey and Dee Dee, right?
I did. I discovered that the Ramones were from my own neighborhood somewhere around 1977. In 1977,
I love that.
I was how old was I? 14. So to find out like this coolest band in the world, like grew up like, you know, like a half mile away, I was like, oh, this is the greatest thing. So I was really obsessed with the Ramones.
And I'm going to step on your story.
I never saw them live. Yeah, I never saw them live or anything like that. So you know, we go back to this idea, like I didn't see enough bands live. That's the one thing I regret. I lived in New York and did not go see enough bands. They were right in my backyard. I was kind of a homebody. I spent a lot of time in the basement with the headphones, and I should have spent more time going out to Manhattan. But so years go by. Let's fast forward. So now I'm in Not a Surf, and then we're asked to play on a tribute album it was an Iggy Pop tribute album. Mm-hmm. And we had a track, and Joey had a track, but he wasn't with the Ramones. He had done it with some band. I don't know who they were. I don't recall now. And so now there was the party to celebrate the opening of the release of the album. And they say, hey, you guys want to play? Oh, by the way, Joey's band is not available. Do you want to play with Joey Ramone? Do we want to play with Joey Ramone? So we chewed on that for about 30 seconds, said yes. And so we had a short list of things we had to play with Joey. 1969 by the Stooges. I think also 1970, if I'm not mistaken. I think we hit the 2 years back to back. What's the one? Boom, 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 boom. Oh, it's 1969. So 1969, yeah. And then so like 2 or 3 songs, and maybe like one row. Oh, it was the first one of the first Ramone singles. It was Rockaway Beach, or no, it was like Nashina. It was I thought maybe it was Sheena. I don't know. It was such a basic
pop, maybe.
Probably Blitzkrieg Bop.
Sedated. It's definitely not that one.
No, it wasn't Blitzkrieg Bop. It was a bigger single. It was a big single.
Not Rock and Roll High School.
No, it was. Oh my God, I'm such an idiot.
There's so many singles. It's hard.
Yeah.
No, like the big ones, like not Rockaway Beach. It was like
Beat on the Brat.
Nah. Anyway, whatever it was, I'll think of it as I explain the story. So now we're sort of given this task as a band, like you're going to back up Joey Ramone, and we, being the kind of people we are, we're like, well. Again, I'd never seen the Ramones live. I didn't know how fast they play those songs in real life. We only knew that single, which is it's kind of moderate in retrospect. Now, it's kind of like a mid-tempo thing. So we learned it. We learned it like that. We played it for weeks and weeks. We're going to just play, we're right down the pocket. So we learned it, like we played it for months. And now the day comes and like we're going to rehearsal and we're down on the Lower East Side and Joey's going to show up and we're so nervous. None of us can talk. We're like dry mouth. Like Joey Ramone's about to walk in the room. He walked in. He was a lovely guy. I couldn't understand a word he said. Came in the same neighborhood as me. Couldn't understand a word he said. That could have like that lamb bleat that he has. I'm like, what? It was fascinating. And he was very sort of, obviously he was very sweet, very shy, very, he had a guy with him, his Daniel Ray, who was guitarist and his producer, sort of served as a liaison for him. And, so he would say, because I found out later, he was kind of sort of a OCD kind of, complicated individual. But he was lovely. He was lovely. And so we had this moment where we're standing, the three of us are playing Ramone song, and then we're in a mirror. There's a mirror on the wall, and there's Joey standing in the middle of the thing, big Joey Ramone, and there's the bass player, and there's Matthew, and I'm in the middle. I'm like, this is too much for me. Like, it was still the greatest moment of my life. And we ended up playing a couple of shows. He said he had such a good time playing that first show. He invited himself to play, like, if you guys are playing a show, I'll come and play. So we played a show at Coney Island High in Manhattan a few months later, and he walked on the end of the set, and we played 7 Ramone songs with him.
That's awesome.
I still get to thinking about it. It was off the charts, just like the greatest thing ever. So, and he was a lovely guy. As a matter of fact, his manager that night, I'm bragging, but the manager said, "Hey, if you guys want to go on the road with Joey, he would love you to." And we were like, "Yeah, we'd love." If we were in a band like with our own career, we would totally have loved to have been the backing band for Joey Ramone. As a Queens of Parcels native, I like it was literally the greatest moment of my life. I was like floating. It was just like the old days. That's what he said. So it was just like the old days. And the guitarist wanted me to play it faster. That was my point of my story, was that as we rehearsed the song, I counted it off. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the guitarist goes, no, wait. Let me count it off. I'm like, I had to sort of put my drum slide down for 1 second. I'm like, all right, Daniel Ray, you're his man. I submit. Fealty. And he went, 1, 2, 3, 4. He did a DD, but I continued to go. I just laid it right in there. And he tried to fight me for the first 8 measures. He tried to get me to go faster, and I refused to do it. And at the end of which, Joey Ramone turned around and said, "Hey, man, that was just like the old days." I was like, yes, I win. Even if Daniel Ray hates me for not playing it fast enough, that alone. So yeah, it was an amazing moment of having this little sort of being on the other side of the mirror just for like a kind of a second. Wow, nothing like it.
And something I mentioned earlier is, Ira, you also backed Rick Ocasek, who produced the first Not a Surf record. So there's been some very highfalutin projects in your career, to say the
I've
very
been really lucky. I met a lot of really insane cats, as we say. Cats.
Yeah. Well, Shari, hey, throwing it back to you here. What was the band or the artist that made you want to pick up drums in the first place?
That's a great question. I just, different time period, but, growing up, being a 90s kid, I feel like everything was centered around music, and then music was bleeding into TV. So I was obsessed with, MTV, and I always just wanted to be in a band, like even hearing pop music, all the pop music that was out, but always loved, like even going, obviously before the 90s, classic rock, I always loved. So I always wanted to play music, and really when Blink-182 was taking off in the 90s, I was just obsessed with Travis Barker's drumming. And I just thought it was incredible, and I always would go home after school and try to play like him. He plays like this, and I couldn't really do it. I was like new to drums. But I'm like, his style is so awesome. I guess what I look for is when a drummer really has their own style.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, going back to Keith Moon and Ringo, I mean, John Bonham, all have their own style. And it's such a specific style, like we could hum out probably like a John Bonham beat because it was so specific and unique.
Yeah. Those are good picks right there. Steve, I'll throw you before Ira, we're participating.
Another part of it is also like the band ended up playing it. Like those drummers could have, technically speaking, played in any number of bands, but like Keith Moon ended up in a band with Townsend, who wrote him these big landscapes that he could fill. If he had been another type of band, he might not have been able to play that way. John Bonham was able to play that way through the compositions. They each happened to end up in a band that sort of seemed to, they were able to use their personal thing in the context of the band in which they play. Charlie, if you try to switch out any of those drummers with those other bands, it wouldn't seem to make any sense at all.
It's so true. Like Keith Moon being in, let's say, the Beatles.
Yeah,
it would have. Yeah, it would have sounded like
that game all the time. I'm one of those people who likes to get into arguments about why Ringo is great, and because people still like to tell me somehow that Ringo is not very good. So I'm game for that fight. I'm the man for that argument. So. That's what I'm saying. Put some other drummer that you think is really great. Put them in the Beatles. What do the Beatles sound like? Put Phil Collins in the Beatles. Good luck. I mean, actually, that's not the
sound like.
That's actually a pretty good one. But for the most part, you try to put Ginger Baker in the Beatles, or someone of that generation, not a liquid drummer. But you try to find someone of the same time period who would work.
Yeah, it's the balance.
Pete Best. I don't know. No one really.
Yeah. Well, I remember watching some Beatles documentary, and I think it was Paul was saying that Ringo was why his drumming is so good is that he would always be such a good, not the exact quote that was said, but he'd be such a good signal for the next part that was coming, and his style that was being played was a way for the band to know certain parts were coming. And also it didn't take away, there's so much amongst the three of them, George Harrison, Paul, John Lennon. You have such incredible songwriting. There's so much going on that I think Ringo's style just made it very smooth, and there's specific fills that give it such a good flow. It's not taking away from anything.
Yeah.
So I'm with you in this argument.
Well, but before I ask my last question, which is getting everyone to plug what they're currently up to, I'm curious who of the three of you have heard Keith Moon's solo album, Two Sides of the Moon?
I've heard one. I've listened to one or two tracks off that record. It is genuinely cringeworthy. That is a difficult thing to listen to. It's I think it's maybe, I don't know. I compare it to the Metallica Lou Reed record, but I don't know if that's a worthy analogy. But yeah, no, it's his singing is dreadfully bad. He is not a comfortable singer.
I'm scared to listen to it.
Yeah,
it's worth to listen to. It's really hilarious. Yeah, it's kind of like those Linda McCartney tapes, where they soloed her out. You're like, ooh, that wasn't a good idea.
It's I don't know how it fares versus, say, the Dee Dee Ramone rap album is Dee Dee King. That's pretty up there as well. Have any of you heard the Dee Dee King stuff?
Kind of nervy. That's ballsy. I've heard some of his rap music. It wasn't really that bad. He was a good writer. Keith could write. He was singing stuff. It was so weird. It's that there was a single. There's a great footage of him in the studio putting vocals on some really absurd single. I'm never.
It was. I think it was "Don't Worry, Baby" by the Beach Boys.
I'll text you guys later.
Well, the key is,
he was a Beach Boys guy. He wished he would be able to sing all these harmonies. He just didn't have. It's kind of adorable. And
yes, don't we all?
He's totally unperturbed. It doesn't seem to bother him at all. He's like, yeah, I'm Keith Moon. Screw you.
It's all confidence.
It's all confidence.
That's what it takes. That's what drummers
no matter what you
that's the bottom line. The bottom line is self-confidence. That's what drummers, if you have no self-confidence, you can't possibly be a good drummer. You have to that's your basic fuel, coffee and self-confidence.
Well, speaking of confidence, coffee, and drummers, Steve, you are how we wound up all connected right here. So Forbidden Beat is the newest book, but you had a new book a couple of months ago. So yeah, there you go. Ira is holding it up. So Steve, are you allowed to say, is your punk rock detective series coming up? What's coming up?
The 3 books in the Greg Salem Punk Rock PI series are a fully formed trilogy, and they are in the past at this point. I also wrote a couple of novellas about 2 brothers in a power pop band who steal Beatles artifacts, another crime series based on rock and roll. I did the 2 Power Pop books, which were nonfiction, and I co-edited those with Paul Myers. I just did Forbidden Beat, and really my next stretch is going to be talking to as many people as I can about Forbidden Beat, because I have so many incredible contributors and so many unbelievable stories like Shari's, like Ira's, like everybody else in this book. I look at that table of contents and I'm like, I owe it to these people who gave me their time and their energy and their experience and their stories to go out and bang that drum, sorry for the pun, for as long as people will talk to me about the book. So really that's what I'm going to be up to for the next few months.
And is SAR doing anything in the near future? Anything on the drumming musical end?
I play, so 3 of the guys from Czar, Jeff Whalen, the lead singer, the bass player, Jeff Solomon, and myself play in a power pop band called the Brothers Steve. And we've put out 2 records, and the second one came out last year. There's starting to be rumbling of like, we got a studio, we should record some more music. And, you know, if that becomes a real thing, then you will be among the first people to know, because I'll obviously ask you to come back.
Jackpot. Shari, same question at you. I called it out earlier. Thick, I got the press release for the 5 Years Behind album when it came out on Epitaph. Are you allowed to say what you're up to, or is it under a Deadline.com Hollywood Reporter embargo? You know, publicists go, no, don't say it.
Yeah.
I wish we were at a point in our careers where I'm like, I can't talk about it because TMZ. I mean, we're going on tour soon. We're touring with the Chats and Mean Gene soon, and we're also doing Punk Rock Cruise, the Falling in Molly Cruise, which I'm so excited about. I'm such a Descendants fan, and Descendants are going to be playing on the cruise, and I feel like I'm going to just faint.
Yeah. Bill Stevenson, he's in the book.
Yeah, that Bill Stevenson is hands down, in my opinion, one of the best punk drummers of all time. And you hear his influence in so many places, and he very rarely gets credited. But I really think that band and his drumming really set up what pop punk became.
Yeah, it's so surfy also. It's like punk and surfy, and it writes so well to the melody.
There's some of this in there too. Agent Orange was another surfy punk band from Southern California back in those times.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Orange, yeah. I remember interviewing Steve Soto. He was in that band, and we lost him a couple years ago. He was in 22 Jacks.
Yep.
Yeah, great player, great band. And Ira, last but not least, of course, bands in town alerts for upcoming Not a Surf tour dates have been popping up for me lately. But what else is the happening?
Like everybody else, I feel like we booked and canceled like 6 tours. You know, we did one short American tour at the end of last year, which was great, went really nicely. And we have just 3. This right now, all on the board is 3 American shows, all in the north. There's New Hampshire and New Jersey, and there's 3 up in there on Connecticut, some like very little thing, around a Beachcomber show up in Massachusetts. And then, so that exists, that's like in July. And then there's a 2 or 3 week run in Europe about a month or so later. We're trying to figure out how to make a new record. We're actually, you know, speaking of things I shouldn't probably talk about, we are in fact working on a project right now that I shouldn't talk about, and I'll tell you what it is. It's I'm
so excited.
We're doing a Taylor Swift sort of move, and we, you know, the one out we've made, I don't know, I've lost count actually, like 8 or 9 records over the years, and but our first record is still owned by Elektra. So we decided to take it back and re-record that entire record in a new way. Well, like piece by, well, now where we are, instead of going into a studio and doing it, I think we're going to do it piecemeal. So I'm starting with drum tracks here, trying to get, it's a mind bender how to recreate something you did in Electric Ladyland with Rick Ocasek at the helm in my shed in the back with a couple of microphones. So I'm trying to sort of get the energy of the same, try a nice recording, similar energy, try to get, trying to go back through those arrangements. I was 20 years younger. I had all this energy. Some of those are really hard to play. They're very punk rock. We were a very garage band at the time, very Clash influenced, and a lot of the compositions were kind of full tilt. So that's what we're kind of working on quietly, piece by piece. We've just started that project, so I'm very excited.
And the hit
and
single,
then we'll make a new record later in the year, and we'll be a new record next year.
And the hit single from that record, High Low, recently got a reworking that went viral. What was the artist that redid the video at the same high school in Bayonne?
Pom Pom Squad.
Pom Pom Squad. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to answer. I was just
no. I'm glad you did. Pom Pom. Yeah, they were amazing. They were so amazing. And it's funny, Shari. I have to tell you an honest, true story. I had never heard of your band, so I went and I watched a couple of songs, which I loved. And the other great one was called Mansplaining, which I immediately choked up, because what happened was Pom Pom Squad came on the road with us, and they were great. And they were a new band. This was their first tour ever. And I am like, oh my God, first tour ever. I wanted to be such a great experience for them. We didn't want to prank them. We thought about all this stuff. We could mess with them. I wanted to nurture them. So I immediately went to the drummer like, hey, listen, can I help you? Like, on my natural instinct. But I feel like I watched the video, I'm like, oh my God, I totally mansplained the shit out of it. It made me feel awful. My intentions were good, but I hope she did. I don't think she took it that way. I hope she didn't anyway. No, they were fantastic to tour with, and that was their first tour. They had such a great idea. No, they're fantastic. They're a great band. They're great players. She's an amazing. She does this thing in the show, which is like, it's very, very Kurt Cobain. She's got an amazing throaty scream, which goes through you. Like, she's got great control over it, but it goes through you. It's electric, and it works really beautifully in the show. It's very, wow. It just she uses it very skillfully. She's a great singer and has a very powerful voice. And the band and the music complements this idea that she's bringing around. They have a great idea. I was really impressed with it.
Yeah, they're a great live band.
Well, this has been a mutual appreciation society. So what we've learned today is everyone has great new projects in the works. Steve, you compiled a hell of a book, and it's not the only thing that you have coming soon. Ira, we can see you on tour soon. Shari, we can see you on tour soon. Steve, we're I don't know what touring we're going to see, but that's just fine.
Steve's going to do the book tour.
That's it. Darren, thank you so much for having us back again.
Thank you, Darren. It's been too long. I haven't seen you. I think the last time I saw you, were we in Tokyo the last time we saw each other?
That was the last time at the Nano Mugen Festival, I believe, which your singer kindly picked up the tab for everybody in the afterbar, which reaffirms that Matthew is one of the nicest people in the world. And
second that emotion.
And that was not your only time in Japan, correct?
We've been there twice, I think. I think that was maybe the second of two.
Yeah. So coming back to Japan very soon. Not a Surf featuring Ira, Mr. Meaner Elliot. I can't say Mr. Meaner. But thank you all for doing this. Thank you all for watching this.
Thank you so much for
Darren. Thank you, and also thanks to the Long Beach Public Library System. It's really awesome that you guys had us on again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to the LBPL. Thanks to all the Nassau County libraries. And thank you to all the people who appreciate great damn punk drumming.
Paltrocast.